Oh, yes, thank you, Professor. I'm Anthony Chia. I have many affiliations, but my current affiliation is campaign manager for Mr. Tan Kin Lian. The other parts about me you can read in today's Straits Times. Now, I was sharing with you during the pre-registration that my wife told me, darling, you may be working for Tan Kin Lian, but if Professor Tomiko stands for the post, he's got my vote.
This is an irrelevant comment, no?
Okay.
I'm not a candidate.
Now, having been prepared...
Can you ask a relevant question?
Okay, now the question is, given the minister's explanation about the constitutional role of the president, if you were such a candidate, how would you position yourself and how would you campaign in a dignified manner, given the restrictions that now is being clearly specified by the minister? I have a follow-up, but maybe you could give a simple answer.
That's a good question. I mean, given the legal limitation that we all know now and respect, supposing you're a candidate for the office of the elected president, how would you conduct your campaign? What would be your key messages?
Well, the reason why I spent a little bit of time explaining the limitations is because there has been so much discussion, which, as I said, is divorced from legal reality. Can he do this? Can he do that? He is going to speak up. He is going to speak for the people. He is going to do this. So that doesn't mean, and I took some pains to emphasize, the president doesn't have powers. He both has clear, precise powers, very significant powers in 5 areas: detentions, corruption, investigations, appointments, key appointments. The way you corrupt a government is by having appointments suited to yourself, reserves. So you have significant power. So don't go away with this impression that it's limited. The point is, you can't do certain things. I don't see why the fact that you can do X number of things, you cannot do Y number of things, limits you in the way you campaign. You just make sure that what you say to the people is consistent with what you can constitutionally perform. Don't say things that you can't do.
Leanne has written about something that's going to happen soon, which is that each candidate, once the candidate gets a COE, will be allowed to hold one rally. And I've been actually quite puzzled,
Yes.
Supposing you're a candidate and you don't want to badmouth your friends who are also competing for the office, what can you say at your rally?
I'll just comment as a citizen of Singapore who actually voted in the first presidential elections. I remember it very vividly because it's the first time I ever voted. And I remember the 2 televised campaigns between Mr. Ong Teng Cheong and Mr. Chua Kim Yao. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first campaign, Mr. Chua Kim Yao basically said Mr. Ong Teng Cheong was the better candidate. So I would say that's not a good way of campaigning, first and foremost. I mean, humility and modesty to me are very important traits, but you're not going to get my vote if you're too self-effacing. And I do remember the second 10-minute TV slot, Mr. Chua Kim Yao seemed to, have eaten some chili padi, and he said, "Do you want a PAP president?" Which is a bit, okay, it's political because, Ong Teng Cheong had already resigned from the PAP. You cannot belong to a political party. But I would say that it's a really hard thing to campaign for because you are reactive. So you can't say, "I promise that when the government spends the money, I will say no." It's what everybody will say. And, so I would say that the only thing you can do to distinguish yourself is to convince us you're independent, convince us you can swan su, you can count things, right? And convince me that you actually know what you're talking about when it comes to your role. I will never vote for someone who doesn't know what he's standing for. I think that's very basic. I will respect someone who actually knows, well, I'm being voted in to do this job. Right? And so as a voter, I would look to that competence in finance. Not you don't have to be a genius, but, better than me. And that's not a very high threshold. And last but not least, an independent person. And I'll get that by watching the TV and going to a rally.
And when you are deciding this last criterion, Leanne, about independence, the fact that 3 of the candidates were previously members of a political party, would you hold that against them? Does that make them less independent,
I
or
would
you would judge the character and say the character of the person gives me confidence that if elected to the office, that he would act independently.
Well, I was very young when the first presidential elections came out, and my salad days. But as the minister knows, I'm in my yonder years now, and a little bit wiser.
Okay.
And 20 years ago, I probably would have taken it against them. But I had the chance to actually work with President Ong on his first constitutional reference. Mm-hmm. And what struck me was how remarkably independent a thinker he was. So I would say personally, at least, I tend to look at a person. And
Right.
I don't know how you judge these things. But I tend to see, I actually do believe that the office makes the person. And I guess I'll see whether or not the person has that kind of mentality. Once he gets into the position, he won't be beholden. Incidentally, if you look at the presidential oath, you have to swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to any political party you belong to. So, I would like to see the politicians who are members of political parties show me that they have knowledge of that clause. I will respect that.
Yeah.
Okay.
As
May I
a- Wait,
follow?
I think, Anthony, I think you should give way to another
No, I have
person.
a follow-up.
I'll call on you later.
Yeah, okay.
Let's give others a chance first. As a historical footnote, for those who are interested in history, Lee Ann, Walter Woon, Joe Greenberg, and I were part of the legal team that advised President Ong Teng Cheong in a legal dispute between him and... Huh? You couldn't, huh? Yeah. And,
1995.
and 1995, which went to the Court of Appeal. I think the question of independence is a good point, So I think that maybe I should ask Minister Shanmugam to just say a word about what do you understand by independent, and how would you judge whether a candidate is independent or not?
Prof, at the end of the day, it comes to the timber of the man. Is he of a presidential timber? Is he able to discharge the duties in the way that commentators have set out? Skill, wisdom, knowledge, the ability to discharge those duties with the right mix of acumen, and also know how he can influence the government. Doesn't matter what his past affiliations were or are,
Okay.
as President Ong proved.
Yeah, right. Thank you.